Welcome to Lady Dynamite Creates. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for entering in the giveaway and to congratulate Cute Dark Arts as our winner. Now on to the doll! To start our project off this week, I chose this Dracula from the Haunted line. I chose her because I'm going with an icy, frosty winter theme for this fairy, and I figured that the pink would be a nice contrast to the blushing that I plan to do in blues and purples. I prepped her like normal, cutting her hair short and then buzzing it down. Then I popped her into a cup of hot water. This softens the vinyl and the glue inside, allowing both to be removed easily. Once the head is off, I use a flathead screwdriver to scrape inside, and this loosens the plugs, and I just pull those out with some needle nose pliers. Now with 100% acetone, I remove the face up. Now to do a little bit of modifications to allow for the wings. First thing I do is I take a drill bit into my Dremel that is the same gauge thickness as my wire I plan to use, and drill in the holes in the back. After I drill the holes, I test to make sure I didn't damage the shoulder joint, and I insert the wire to see if I still have movement. Now for the wing transition. I take a little bit of epoxy sculpt and I mix up equal parts of A and B. I insert some temporary wire while I work. This allows me to build up the epoxy without covering up the holes. Then I just sculpt two wing base shapes that I like, and I use water to smooth out the transition edges, and then a silicone tool to detail. After about an hour, the epoxy has set up enough that I can safely remove the wire without it damaging the sculpt. Don't let it sit for too long though, because it could glue the wire in place. Now onto the wings. I've sketched out my wing shape, and the first thing I start doing is measuring out the lengths of wire that I need. First I measure for one piece, and then I cut two of those, one for the right, one for the left. The top and bottom pieces of the wing will be receiving a thicker gauge wire than the middle veining. Once all my wire pieces are cut, I take a piece of Angelina film and I tack that down in place. Then I start shaping out all of the individual pieces of wire. I shape out the top and the bottom piece and connect those to form a frame. Then, using a very thin amount of gem tack, I glue each piece of wire to the Angelina film. Once you have all the pieces in place, set it aside to dry. Once dry, the glue will no longer be visible on the back side. Once your glue is dry, take the piece of Angelina film with the glued on wires and you put another piece on top of that, sandwiching the wire in between both sheets. Then you take some parchment paper and wrap on either side of that, and then you just hit it with a flat iron. This heat seals the two pieces of Angelina film together. Now take some scissors and cut away the excess pieces. And then you can hit some of the areas with a lighter to get a more natural look if you wish. And remember what I said earlier about making sure that your glue is dried? Well, I didn't on the second wing, and you can see that it's very cloudy. So I had to remake these wings. Now that I have that second set of wings made, I'm going to be detailing them out with some glitter and some nail caviar. So just using a little bit of that gem tack. I put it on the areas that I want it, and then I have copious amounts of glitter and nail caviar on everything. Now onto the face up. For this face up I used my usual pencils, but I did try the Jane Davenport pastels this time around. I'm not a huge fan of them. They work okay, but they do require a lot of buildup. This video I am trying something new. I'm going to be indicating up in the top right hand corner how many layers of sealant I am on. With the Jane Davenport pastels, I did feel like I was using many more layers than I normally do. It makes you want to consider the price of things because you use this sealant on each doll and you have to constantly replenish that, whereas with pastels they go a lot longer. So is it worth it to buy the cheaper pastels up front, or to spend more money on more highly pigmented artist grade pastels and have to use less sealant? The first thing I did was using a pink watercolor pencil. I made her eye shape. Using the pink just helps me to correct any mistakes when I'm first getting the shape down. And then I fill in the whites of the eyes. I'm using a Faber Castell white pastel pencil. This gives really great coverage to get those white scaleras opaque very quickly. Now, just starting with various blues and purples, I start blushing out her face. I detail out around her eyes and around the nose and mouth, and then I give the ears a hit as well. I did want to talk a little bit about the hairstyle, even though I won't be showing me rerooting or styling it. It was just too much of a hassle because this was such a new thing for me to try. I decided I wanted her to have a very short pixie cut, and I followed Mosekuto's tutorial for this. However, instead of it being a wig, I rerooted her T-line, so her part and the front of her hair, and then I laid in wefts up the sides and back so that they laid down flat and you could get that very short pixie style haircut. I'll leave a link in the description box below. For the styling of her hair, I wanted it to be very spiky and all over the place, kind of like an anime styled haircut. So what I did was used a little bit of watered down PVA glue. I had someone in the doll community recommend this, and it worked extremely well. Then with a larger fluffy brush, I contour around the face, making sure to get right around the hairline and in the cheeks. And I give her a very light dusting of blush on the cheeks. Now on this face up I use copious amounts of glittery mica powder. Right here I am highlighting the forehead and right under the eyes with this shimmery iridescent blue purple. Then, using my watercolor pencil, I detail out some of the lines around the ears, and then I take that and give a pass at the nose as well, darkening up the nostrils and right around the outside edges of the nose. Then I deepen up some of the bagging under the eyes and then define the eyelid crease. And this completes my first layer, and as you can see my pastels are still very light, and over the course of the doll on every sealant layer I do have to darken these. I don't always show it because it's very repetitious, but it happens. And the first thing I do on this layer is define the eyebrows. I like to do this on a fresh layer because if I have to erase, which I usually do, I don't want to erase some previously made blushing. This was my third attempt at eyebrows on her. Now I start detailing around the eyes and I darken up her top eyeliner, and then I start giving the waterline some details. I make it a darker red towards the corners and lighter in the middle. Then taking a dark brown pencil, I define the edge of where the eyeball itself meets the waterline, and I build up more white. Then using a few different methods, I start darkening up the areas around her eyes. And I'm giving her a very sad expression. Seems to be one of my go-tos for my fantasy creatures, much to my daughter's chagrin. She has told me that they need to be more kawaii. I told her, this is a winter fairy and we live in Southern California. She's a sad winter fairy. Here I'm taking another pass at the eyebrows, giving them some more defined individual hairs this time. And then I add in a little bit of dark smoky eyeshadow. Now I use my white pastel pencil to highlight right around the eye. And the last thing I do on this layer is do some detailing to the lips, and then I seal and get started on the next layer. I decided I wanted a little bit of furrowing to her brow, so I define that here, and then I get started basing in her eye shape. I'm using an aqua to base out her eyes in, but I'm using a pale yellow to bring out some of the highlighting in it, and then a deep aqua for some contrast. And then I just slowly build up color and define the shape until it won't build up anymore. Here I'm just taking a very light gray and giving the sclera some shading to give the eye a more round feel. Here I highlight the nose and the forehead, and then I seal again. First thing on this layer I do is darken in some of the areas of the eye, giving a greater contrast, and then add in some of the detail striations. And this time around I decided to go with a monochromatic iris. There will be no black pupil this time. Now I go ahead and add some of the lighter striations using some pearlescent white gouache and darken up the pupil again with some watercolors pulled straight off the pencil. Now using my very sharp, very hard-leaded Faber Castell pencil, I start adding in my lashes and just do quick little flicks. And I have to say, I usually hate doing lashes, but these I think are the best lashes I've ever done. They just turned out so nice. But I take a pass of putting them down and then a pass of darkening. Then I do the same thing for the top lashes, and you'll see me count to make sure I do the same number for both sides. And then I seal after this. Now using my gouache, I go ahead and try to add my catch lines, and as you can see, I royally screw this up. But that's the advantage of using gouache. I just take a wet Q-tip, dab it on there, and pull it right off. Then I go back and I put the correct ones on. I lightly apply this into the eyebrows, giving it some detail, and then just some here and there on the waterline, corners of the eye. And then I lightly go across the tops of each eyelash and give it a highlight. And once that's done, I give her a final seal. And after her hair's been removed from its covering, I go ahead and clean up that hairline where I did get a little bit of sealant and pastel onto. So you can see I just lightly take a comb and rub it across there. Sometimes I use my fingernail just to pick up the tiny pieces. Then I get ready to put her hairpiece on. This is just something I made out of a little bit of hot glue, some Angelina film, glitter, and nail caviar. Just kind of a happy accident, me experimenting. Then I get the body ready to be prepped for blushing. I take and I scrape down some of the egregious seams that are just really bad with a X-Acto blade. Then I give her a thorough sanding all over, making sure to get rid of that glossy top coat. And then once she's been given a coat of MSC, I can go ahead and get her wing stumps based out and start the body blushing. And honestly, blushing the body was the portion where I could tell the biggest difference in my pan pastels and the Jane Davenport pastels. Normally, I can get away with just doing one pass at body blushing with my pan pastel. These Jane Davenport pastels required at least 3, it may have been 4, I can't remember for certain, just to get it built up enough. Overall, I could say these are okay for face-ups, but I definitely won't use them again for body blushing, and definitely not if I ever want to do a skin change. The pan pastels may be a higher cost up front, but I feel like I save money in the long run by not having to buy as much sealant. Now onto the clothes. For the top portion of the dress, I'm using this warble as a base. I heat it up with my heat gun, and once it's pliable, I wrap it around my mannequin doll. Then I hit it with a bit of canned air to quickly cool it down. Now using an ink pen, I sketch out the shape that I would like for my bodice. Once I'm happy with the shape, I cut it off the doll along with the cling wrap that I used to protect the mannequin. Then I cut along my shape lines, and then I base this piece out in white acrylic. Now to finish off the top, I've taken my piece of white applique I've cut out and I match it up to my seams, and using a little bit of fabric glue, glue the pieces together. And I use these tiny fabric clips to hold it in place while the glue sets. For the skirt, I take a very long rectangle of white tulle and I gather that up at the top edge. And once that's gathered, I take a piece of white ribbon that is the length that I need for the waist and sew that to the top there. I heat seal the edges and then I add in a hook enclosure. Then with that, the outfit's done. The final thing to do is get her dressed and to attach her wings. To set the wings in place, I'm going to be using the JB Weld Instant Setting Epoxy. This stuff sets in 1 minute. However, it is extremely toxic. I won't be doing this on camera because I am going outside. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and if you'd please like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would appreciate it greatly. And remember, always be creating!